Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. Let us know where you think we got it right or where you think we got it wrong, which you can do by visiting unsilentpodcast.com. See us on Rumble or other social media channels. Lots of good comment sections there. So, Brian, what do you think? The world's not much happening in the world this week. I think I said that last week, and this week's just as boring.
Yeah, I mean, relatively speaking, a few weeks we've had, this one is somewhat boring. Like nobody was, no presidential candidates were shot.
Assassination attempts.
Nothing like that. So this week, or actually last week, as this is being aired, Kamala Harris picked her running mate, and she didn't choose the candidate, the governor from Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, who was largely seen as like the best candidate. First of all, he'd help in Pennsylvania, which she can use the help there because it's always a hotly contested state. But he's just a good politician. Like though people who don't agree with his policies, like they say that he's a strong politician.
Yeah,
and it seems to be the consensus from whoever they is, right, is that he wasn't chosen because he's Jewish.
He's a Jew. Oh no.
Yeah. And that would not sit well with the certain elements within Kamala Harris's party. And again, like many things we talk about, going back in time 20 years, I could not even fathom that being a possibility, let alone if it's a reality. Like it's unbelievable that would even be a plausible explanation.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's interesting. Ben Shapiro had predicted that a while back. They said there's no way that because of the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party. I mean, it's not surprising though, because if the far left of the Democratic Party, the Squad and their compatriots who won't condemn, Hamas, who is assigned as an international terrorist organization by the United States and by most everybody, if they won't even condemn them or condemn, posting of Hamas flags on college campuses or anti-Semitic tropes painted all over statues, or the list goes on, then how in the world could they ever accept a Jew for the VP of their party? They couldn't do it.
It's not very many weeks ago, towards the end of the last college school year. So I guess it'd be a few months ago now, a couple months ago now, where, Jewish students on college campuses were really in fear.
Oh, yeah.
And there was all that testimony on Capitol Hill and things like that. And you and I briefly touched on it then about, the Christians and Jews seem to get a lot of this because they believe in a power bigger than government,
right?
AKA God, right? And but I just never would have imagined that it would be like blatantly. Now, again, I can't say that I know anybody's intentions, and I can't say why she did anything or whatever, but it certainly seems to fit the motif.
Well, it does, and in particular when she doesn't have a lot of love from her own party. I mean, they will take anybody other than Trump, to be sure, and they will fight like there's no tomorrow for anybody other than Trump. But if you tick off the Squad wing of the party, the Leninist wing, if you will, of the party, if you get them mad enough, and some of them just don't show up to vote, they're not going to vote for Trump. But if they don't show up to vote in places like Michigan or Georgia or wherever, then she could be toast. So she probably made a politically justifiable, I'm not saying it's right, but she probably made a politically justifiable decision given who she has to deal with. And given the fact, I mean, it is staggering to me that the party that claims the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union,
Yeah.
who in theory stands up for people when they are oppressed because of immutable characteristics such as your national origin or
Right.
your heritage. It's staggering that that could be a significant consideration. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, it really is. The only thing that again, as we're recording this, or as people are hearing this, it will have been a week and a half or so since Cori Bush lost her seat.
Right.
She was voted out, and Jamal Bowman was a few weeks ago as well. So it does feel like there's kind of a juxtaposition. Like these people are
Yeah.
being voted out, but the movement is still continuing to pick up speed and pick up steam, this kind of anti-Semitic, like it's okay to be anti-Semitic as long as you don't say the word Jew. Like it's okay, you can do these things as long as you don't blatantly say the right word.
Right.
It's just wild to me that I mean, again, when I was growing up, like people felt real compassion for Jewish people because of the Holocaust, if nothing
Right.
else.
There's some
And
significantly
and
bad
you can
stuff.
look back centuries before that where atrocious things have been done to them, just like many other groups that are looked upon as oppressed now and things
Right.
like that. It's just wild to me how quickly all that evaporated. It
Yeah.
blows my mind. So we don't need to spend a lot of time on that. One of the things I do want to talk to you about though is um, mainstream quote unquote mainstream media, or what I generally refer to as like corporate media, like the
Yeah.
ABC News, New York Times kind of stuff. There's not a lot of coverage from them on what's happening in Europe right now.
Yeah.
But because Elon Musk purchased Twitter, now X, there's a lot there's a lot of information available now that wouldn't have been otherwise, and is
Right.
not being covered in the news. So I think most of the American population really has no idea what's going on over there, and I think it's significant. I think it's maybe not, if not a precursor to things to come here.
Yeah.
It's certainly indicative of the times, and also indicative that this fourth turning, this crisis cycle we're going through now, is not strictly an American problem. It's
Right.
a global problem.
It is.
What do you make of what the heck is happening in England and Ireland and all these places? Like, what? First of all, what's going on over there? And secondly, like, why can't it be on the news?
Well, yeah, there's several really fascinating factors that, and I'll talk about the cultures there, which make it even more strange. So there was a son, British-born son of a Rwandan family that had, I think the family had immigrated from Rwanda, who went and stabbed 9 people, kids. 3 of them died. I think it's 3 of them is the death count right now. There's still some in at least as we record this, in intensive care. And folks, just your average Brits are like, they're immigration, their migration, as they call it, has already been a huge issue because there's already this feeling that we're losing our country, that people are not, I don't think they mind so much that people are coming there, but they, they're a proud ancient culture. The United Kingdom is, Britain in particular, England is. And there's a feeling that, hey, we're losing our culture and nobody's doing anything about it because people that are coming here are not integrating. They're wanting to enforce their non-British values on us. And
Right.
so people have just hit the streets. And now the counter protesters, if you will, have hit the streets as well. And throughout Britain and Ireland, I mean, and what makes the situation strange, in particular strange. Now, we Americans, we're vocal when we're ticked off. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the nature of our culture.
Yeah.
I remember
Well, we
one
have the
time.
First Amendment, which we're the only country in the world that has that.
Yeah,
So
we're the only ones that can say things
that's
without fear.
our default, is to like scream and yell when we don't like things.
Exactly. But the British default is not that. The British
Right.
default, they yell at each other in their parliament, but in terms of the average sort of British citizen, tend to be more polite. One time I was there, I was the driver of the taxi that was the lorry that I was in. I said, because I like to do this when I travel. So what do you think of Americans? And he said to me, well, after he thought about that for a little bit, he said, "We are a very loud lot." So I was like, okay, I appreciate the honest answer.
Yeah, it's fair.
It's a
Yeah.
fair answer. But for Britons to hit the street, the Britons are not French. They're the French will, they get a moldy baguette and they're out in the streets screaming.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the Britons are not French. They are not like that. So if the average Briton, the average storekeeper in Manchester, or the average teacher in Liverpool gets out on the streets and starts violently protesting, or even just protesting at all, that's significant. So that's the beginning of the story, at least. I mean, that's nowhere near the end. That's the start of this story. And one other thing I'll mention is I was listening to The Economist, which is a British, old British newspaper, now online like everything else is. And I was listening to them report on the story. And they're reporting, they're a left of center. I wouldn't call them hard left or far left, but they're definitely left of center. And I was listening to the reporting on this. I had already known about the situation and known kind of what's happening there before I heard their reporting, like, this is Wednesday, probably like a Monday, whenever it was. And their reporting was extreme right people hit the street, and then they were talking about disinformation. And the reporting was fascinating. They said, well, and there's so much disinformation about this because it wasn't even an immigrant that did the stabbing. Well, 1 degree of separate, and I kind of yelled at the podcast at that point and said, you're making a distinction that's not a relevant distinction. Yes, it's a Rwandan, a British born Rwandan who lives in those same sort of ghettos, that, most, emigres live in. So from what we know, at least. So there's an attempt by the mainstream media to spin this in such a way that it's all the problem of the far right, of the extreme right. It must be a bunch of neo-Nazis. But even The Economist, in their reporting, was puzzling over the idea, over the thought that, well, there's a lot of kind of average neo-Nazis out there.
Yeah.
So
these aren't the activist class. These are just regular Joe.
Yeah. So so they must have been deceived with the disinformation campaigns
Right.
of Elon Musk on Twitter and, this kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild to watch, how they're I hate to be this cynical, but it does feel like the governments of Western societies really just don't like their citizens. They just wish they had a different lot to deal with.
Right. Well,
And so they have these, many Western countries right now have, we're not the only ones who have an open border, so to speak. Ireland for sure, France for sure, England, the Netherlands, Norway, or all these places. They're having these mass migration, and where people are coming from isn't so important, I don't think.
Right.
What is important is they definitely have a different value set.
Right.
They definitely have different principles and values that they make decisions upon, and how they prioritize what is, or decide what is right and wrong and things like that.
Right.
And it is different. And for the same, cohort, the ACLU cohort, to be saying, the same ones to say, the rape victim didn't deserve it because she wore a mini skirt.
Right.
To now be kind of putting the blame on the people who just are going about their lives and not wanting their country turned into a society with different values than what they want. They're placing the blame squarely on them, and it feels odd. It feels out of touch.
Well, it is victim blaming, victim shaming. A rational, reasonable approach. I think that most, I don't have statistics to back this, but most Britons, I think, would say, sure, come to our country, do it legally, work, and don't try to change us. We're happy to help you. I mean,
Western came here because you like it here. You like what we have. So come here and assimilate and be part of what we have and make it better.
Be a part of us.
Don't leave where you don't like it and come where you think it's better, and then change the better to what you left.
Yeah, don't try to make us into the place that you left, because it'll just be the place that you left then.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's really the hypocrisy of all this, especially the hypocrisy of the left that says they care about equity and about inclusion. Well, the folks that are attempting to force their host country to adopt their ways, are not being very equitable, are not being very inclusive. And as a result of that, we have what we've seen. I mean, we don't know at this point, and when we're recording this, we don't know enough about this kid that did the stabbing to have fathomed all of his inner dark secrets. Obviously,
Right.
he's got some. But, I mean, a number of people are speculating that, well, he probably didn't end up that way, with his parents saying, look how wonderful this country is that took us in and hosted us. And yeah, it's not easy, but we're at least out of Rwanda, where, we could have died any day of the week.
Yeah.
So, there's a good chance that there's some cause and effect at play there.
And this is one incident amongst
Oh,
many
yeah.
incidents, right? That this is not a one-off thing where people just like
Yeah.
this mass stabbing happens and people just took to the streets. This is like number 14 or 17. And as these things have happened, the government is telling the Britons,
Right.
like, be quiet and mind your own business. Like,
Right.
just, this, you can't blame, the immigrants. You can't do all, you can't, you can't be pissed at them like this, it's a one-off thing or whatever. Meanwhile, there's videos of like mobs of the Antifada class. Well, I don't know how you describe that, the cohort, but there's mobs of people going around looking for what they deem quote unquote far right people,
Right.
which I would imagine they're doing based on how people look,
Right.
right?
Right. Exactly.
And they're like, there's like these mobs of people in black hoodies going around like a lynch mob. I mean,
Yeah.
they're literally like hunting for people who look like the kind of people that they want to, and they're slashing their car tires.
Right.
There's women who are reporting that, like, one woman who's on the news, British news channel, she had this whole thing where she says, like, I know this isn't gonna be popular and I might even get fired or something, like whatever her disclaimer was when she started, but she said, my daughter knows like 3 girls who've been raped by these immigrants that are
Right.
coming here.
Right.
This isn't like a fleeting little thing. Like, this is it's having real impact. And so you have that problem.
Yeah.
And then you have the government telling the citizens, like, shut up and be quiet. Like, it's not, quit making a big deal about it. And you're an extremist if you say anything about it.
Right.
And protecting the counter protesters you mentioned,
Right.
protecting them, but not protecting the natural born citizens. It's baffling.
And it's also long term. I read some stats the other day. I wish I had them in front of me now, about the increase in immigrant violent crime since, I think it was like 2019, and it was just a massive amount. But you don't find the BBC putting that kind of thing on the sort of the front page or the front, the lead show on BBC One or whatever. You don't find that being parroted a lot. What you do find is this, and there's no other way to say it, victim blaming. We're blaming
Right.
the Britons that are here. And of course, the government, Britain just got a brand new government just, weeks ago, just got a brand new government with Keir Starmer as the new labor leader over there, who kicked out Jeremy Corbyn. And he's not really come up with some kind of plan other than to empower the police to quell the British public. It seems like, I mean, from this side of the pond, it seems like he's, as you said, he's trying to, say, just stay in your homes and, don't go out. And I mean, what are we we're just going to let our country be, somebody attack kids in our country? I mean, how does that
there
work?
doesn't seem to be a line that can be crossed that they would go, okay, enough is enough. They're
Right.
at this point, I'd not heard of any kind of line that's been crossed or announced that, like, okay, well, don't do this or else. Like, there's
Right.
none of that. There's no sense of just basic law and order.
Right.
It's wild. So, okay, so we have the fact that this is happening. Why do you think the media is, I mean, there's a number of reasons it could be, but why do you think the media is silent on this?
Because it doesn't fit the narrative. I mean, so the narrative is the dominant narrative, the absolutely 100% dominant narrative is oppressed and oppressor. And the British Empire is one of the quote unquote greatest colonial empires in history.
Maybe the greatest if you look at just like sheer acreage that they covered.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They used to say the sun never sets in the British Empire. And
right.
So I think there is, even if it's not overtly, and it is overtly stated in some places, but in other places, maybe not. Well, it was your ancestors that colonized A, B, C, D, just a litany of countries.
Sounds a whole lot like our ongoing theory of, the only two stories in civilization are, our group was born superior to you, therefore we can do whatever we want, or your group did something so atrocious, whatever we do in retaliation is justified.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. I mean, so this is really, I think, what we're talking about. And I think if you, and of course the media can't report that. The media can't say it that way, but it's implied in everything that is being, put forward. In like this Economist story that I was mentioning, what's so frustrating about it was, and I generally think the Economist does a, reasonably good job from a left of center perspective. They're absolutely biased. They can tell it. I'm absolutely biased from my perspective. So no problem. Be that way. And that's why I listen to them, because I want to know the perspective. But what's so frustrating about the way that the story was spun, the way that it was sort of carefully positioned to say that this particular kid, he was just a British citizen. There was no mention of the background and kids just don't on a Sunday don't just stand up and say, I think I'm going to go kill some people. It just doesn't. There's something that leads up to that.
Yeah, and I think on the American media side, there's a second narrative that wouldn't be fit. If you did report that a mass stabbing, affected 9 people and hospitalized 3 or killed however many or whatever the numbers were, well, that kind of shoots a hole in your gun narrative.
Well,
that guns
true.
are the
that's true too.
I did see a cutlery company in England has launched a new line of cutlery that has a blunt end, so the knives can't be used for stabbing.
They need knife control. Register your knives.
I thought that was very indicative of our moment, that we will solve the knives can stab problem, but we will not solve the people murdering our citizens problem.
The stabbers, the stab with, not the stabbers.
You can't get into that. That's for sure.
No.
What do you make? So it's been now, as you and I are recording this, it's been 3 weeks or so since the Trump assassination attempt. What do you make of all that? So we got many things going on here. We still have government bureaucrats and agencies that are saying it was not necessarily. You can, if you ask ChatGPT and other AI things like that, they flat out say that there was no Trump assassination. If you type in assassination attempt TR was the example I heard on a podcast the other day. You know how Google autofills your search query?
Yeah.
It was pulling up assassination attempts on Truman, on
Teddy Roosevelt.
Nowhere does it say that there is a Trump assassination. So according to big tech, it's just not even a thing. You still have government bureaucrats saying that we don't know if it was. It might, and if it was, it might have been a shard of glass that hit him and not actually. So we have all these entities that are still in denial. You have they're zero accountability. The Secret Service gal in charge of that, she finally did resign, but her replacement has come in and picked up where she left off. No problems there. Transparency is lacking, to say the least. They won't share any information about anything other than tell us that nobody's been fired.
Right. Nobody ever gets fired.
And it's 3 weeks. It's 3 weeks on. I mean, what do you make of that? Well,
and I want to add one thing to your list, because everything you said on your list is exactly right. The other thing that I think is interesting to add to that list is outside of a few certain outlets, for the most part, they've forgotten all about it. The media has forgotten all about it. It's like, what? Trump assassination? What? No. Kamala Harris is running for. We got Kamala Harris. We got Walls. So for the most part, and to me, that's perhaps the biggest piece of all of this is the attempt. I mean, nobody can deny that it happened. I mean, Chris Wray, the head of the FBI, said, "Well, I'm not 100%. I haven't ruled out 100% that could have been a shard that I mean, come on, dude, just get with the program here. Are
And
we?
why is that the relevant factor?
Well, yes, exactly. Somebody was shooting at the bloody
I mean,
president.
okay, yeah. So let's say that in some parallel universe, it was a shard of glass from whatever the teleprompter.
Right,
You can see the teleprompters in the video that it wasn't the teleprompter that got
right,
shot.
right.
You can see that in the video, plain as day.
Yeah,
So let's say there was a Coke bottle, a glass Coke bottle
right.
sitting somewhere. Why is it, whether or not it was a shard of glass or the bullet? Why is that the relevant factor to zero in on?
Well, and I think the relevant factor, it's always in the subtext, right? Everything's always in the subtext. And the subtext is, well, Trump made a bigger deal out of it because it wasn't even a bullet. It was, we can't give, he can't, and you know what it really comes down to? He can't be given any victim credit.
Right.
Because
right. You know what? That's a great point, because victim status is all that matters nowadays, and you
victim
can't give him
status
a
is
piece
all
of
that
that.
matters.
That makes
Exactly
perfect
right.
sense.
He can't be given any victim credit because one, we hate him, and two,
Yeah.
we don't want that. That could get him some votes. Victim credit could get him some votes, and so therefore we can't let him have any
And
victim
even
credit.
broader than that, we're building this society now where victim status, the hierarchy of your victim status, determines your stature
Right,
in a
right.
weird inverse kind of way.
Yep.
And so if you acknowledge that this guy's a victim, he would have to, his stature would have to elevate based on your own criteria.
Exactly right. And we can't have that. We absolutely can't have that.
We
So I
can't
think
have
all
that.
of those things are true. I also think that a lot of what's happening in DC, the Chris Wray thing, and the new Secret Service guy got into an argument on the House floor. I don't remember which representative was with, but he was actually getting into an argument. I'm losing sleep over so there's all of that that's happening. And I think, frankly, that a lot of the sort of establishment, if you will, or call them the swamp, whatever. I think they're just so incredibly scared of the Trump second term that they're like, we can't give him any coverage at all. So this is, I think the idea behind this is they're trying to pile as much, stuff on top of that so that it goes away, so nobody remembers that, so it doesn't play a factor in the election.
Yeah, the number of times that Cheadle, whatever her first name, I can't remember her first name, Lisa Cheadle, is that what it is?
Yeah,
Or yeah,
Cheadle, something like that.
The number of times she said that people were accountable.
Right.
Like they kept using this word accountable. Like, well, okay, well, in my world, when there's accountability, when you blow something, like there's consequences.
Somebody
Like
get fired.
the consequence is like the deterrent or
Yeah.
or the result, right?
Yeah.
But there's no consequences. There's
Right.
just words of accountability. Like
Yeah.
we take this seriously and we're losing sleep and we meant to do better. like
Right.
like there's all these like empty words, and I just again, all these little things that are happening are just little microcosms of what's going on in the big picture.
Right.
It's our entire government right now feels like it's just a bunch of empty words.
And it's all based on intention. If I say the right words, then I'm off the hook.
Or
Buck
even
stops
give
with
the
me.
appearance of the right intention. They don't even have to they don't have to really have the right intention.
Well, yeah. Well, because it really exactly. It's magic words. It's magic words. The buck stops with me. I take full responsibility for this. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to resign? No, I'm not going to resign.
No,
Well,
I'm not
what
going to
are you going to
resign.
do? Are
No.
you going to give a $10 donation to the Trump
Is
campaign?
anybody going to be fired? Well, we can't get into that. We can't get into the details of the ongoing
Yeah,
investigation.
the details. Yeah, the operational security, blah 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 blah. So it's just like, I mean, and again, yeah, that's what's so frustrating about all of these things is there's no connection to reality. There's just narrative build. It's all narrative building, and anything and that whole thing and Trump's behavior after that, standing up and saying fight, 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 and raising his hand and all that completely blows their narrative. It completely destroys their narrative because it's like, well, he actually didn't wimp out like they said he. I mean, their thoughts probably, well, he's just a rich, spoiled, his daddy gave him all his money, all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't fit the narrative. So therefore it has to be suppressed.
Right. And one of their problems with that, maybe, I don't know, there's many that could be arguably the biggest, but I think one of the biggest that could be from that whole situation was instinctively. Now, whether or not you like his politics or not, whether or not you like him as a person or not, like put all that stuff aside.
Right.
Instinctively, he demonstrated what leadership is in that moment.
It's true. Yeah, he did.
And they do not demonstrate what leadership is,
Right.
even when they plan to, even when they script it out, they do not do it. And when I say they, I mean the swampy politicians, the swampy bureaucrats, all these figureheads and things like that. Even when they script stuff out, they look like buffoons because we're getting wise to the empty words thing. And this guy instinctively did the thing that they're trying to do and failing at. And holy smokes, does that make them look bad?
Oh yeah. Well, it makes them look so bad that some of those commentators were like, oh, that must have been somehow that was not real. I mean, that must have been staged somehow. So because he wouldn't have really stood up and done that and put himself in harm's way, after if that was a real bullet or, all of these sort of wild-eyed conspiracy things that the left usually likes to engage in were on full display there. It's just bizarre to watch.
And then, okay, so now we have that going on. And again, I'm covering things that I think 60, 70 years from now, when Kenny G is going back and listening, scrutinizing our every word, Dave, because that's what he's going to be doing, is analyzing every word as we encapsulate what this moment in time is like, and trying to capture these things that I think will be long forgotten, or not historically noteworthy. Because again, for those tuning in for the first time, we're talking to a guy we've deemed Kenny G, who is going to be a middle-aged person in the year 2070, 2080, 2090, somewhere in there. As they look back on this period of time and wonder, what the heck are those people thinking?
Right.
So the flip side of this Trump thing, though, is you've got Biden, who's stepped down and has gone like radio silent.
Is he still alive?
I don't know. I literally heard somebody say yesterday, we just need proof of life. And it was funny, but it's not funny because we literally don't. Like, I think I finally saw him wearing a USA with a coat with a flag on the back. He was jumping on a plane going to Paris to watch the Olympics. But that was like the first time he'd been seen like 11 days or something like that, right? And so then you got Kamala Harris, who's now the heir apparent to be the Democratic nominee.
Right.
She's not answered a question for the media, any kind of meaningful question, as you and I are recording this, in like 13 days.
Right.
Some insane number of days that she's not been asked a policy question,
right?
A what's your vision question, a how would you handle this question, a she's going around saying she's going to fix things, she's going to make things cheaper. Okay, well, the obvious question is, why didn't you do it so far? Right. And what would you do different than what Joe did? Because if you would do something different, that means that maybe the things he was doing wasn't working. Or if you're gonna do the same thing, like, hey, the voters should probably know that. Zero questions like that.
Yeah.
And what's okay, so from, again, you and I are biased, there's no question about that. But from my position, you look at how Trump was handled by the media versus this, and it's like night and day different. But the people who watch those news channels think that they're just as hard on her as they are him.
Yeah.
It's a wild world we live in.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, and the sad part is that the sort of the media mind control, if you will, the media, it's really spinning. It's really just media narrative spinning. It's actually a pretty successful model for them to get what they want until something. I mean, the Trump thing happened too fast for them to really, get a good spin on that. So it was just, it was too quick for them to, get the email out to all the newsrooms to say, here's how we're going to spin this kind of thing.
Right.
But I think it's an indicator of how disengaged so many people are. And now if lots of people got engaged, if 20% more people got engaged and decided to look into these things themselves and, and decided that they're going to take an honest look at her record and take an honest gander at, well, yeah, Trump's kind of got some baggage, but, I wonder, that thing they keep asking me, am I better off now than I was 4 years ago? Is what's the answer to that question? Maybe I got maybe I'm not as good off now as I was then. And so maybe I should consider this guy. Or, how legit are he's got 34 felonies for his bookkeeping staff's error. Let's see, maybe they can look into that and say, well, how many, so I think the media narrative is the one that is the most egregious example of truth spinning that we've seen. I don't probably ever in my lifetime, at least.
Yeah, it's hard for me to wrap my head around how people could see how. I mean, looking at Trump when he was in office,
Yeah,
and Biden now, and now Harris now, who's these are the two players who would be the closest, representation of another person in that role.
right.
How they can't see how it's just night and day different with how the media just like balls out attacking Trump and just
Right.
like letting the other people just like hide in the shadows and like nothing happens.
Well, and
How
so
do you think
here's
that happens?
Well, I think it is because people have microwave oven attention spans. I think that's part of it. And I think that's also why, as we speak, at least right now, every position that Kamala Harris has ever held and ever voted on and ever loudly proclaimed is being rewritten to be something completely different for the next 3 months, at least.
Yeah, which I have learned she was not the border czar. That
Yes,
much I have learned.
well, I've also learned, Brian, that if you say that, that must mean you're a racist.
Right. right.
So,
So then you got JD Vance, who's now the
yep.
vice president candidate on the Republican side.
Yep.
And now there's the Weird campaign. Are you familiar with the Weird
Yes.
campaign?
Oh, yes. It's apparently one of the things that he was, that Walz, the governor of Minnesota, was they were impressed by the fact that he called Vance in the Republican ticket weird, and that sort of caught on. It got hashtag status. So I guess all you got to do to impress her is just come up with a hashtag that sticks for a few days.
Well, not only that, but it's like all through the news media, the corporate media, like the JD Vance is being labeled weird.
Well, that's what I said. It was the Kamala Harris campaign, which
gotcha. Yeah, I'm sorry.
The main ABC. So there's the DNC, there's the ABC, there's the CBS.
Yeah. So there's this widespread kind of orchestrated campaign of labeling him as weird.
Right.
And that's like full bore.
Right.
Meanwhile, she's not asking any questions.
Right.
Like she's in the shadows, like nothing going on there.
Right.
And the people the people calling him weird are fully supportive of 6-year-olds cutting off their testicles and breasts, or not breasts yet, but testicles.
Right.
All these things that 20 years ago we would have, vast majority of Americans would have said is weird.
Yes, exactly.
They're not only condoning that stuff, they're supporting it, and you're an ism of some sort if you don't support that stuff.
Right.
And he's the weird one, right? And just because he's, what is their argument about how he's weird?
He's just weird. Now shut up.
Okay.
That's it. Well, I mean, seriously, if they believe that they can make us forget 4 years of Kamala Harris background and, everything that she said and done, and that we don't have access to the interwebs and such, that's what they believe, that we're those level of rubes that we're, oh, okay. Yeah. She's tough on immigrants. Oh yeah. She's tough on crime. Yeah. I heard it. She's made a policy statement. She's going to fix crime. So they have to believe that we are so stupid that we have no midterm memory. We have no long-term memory of the past 4 years. I mean, that's all they can believe. Because, and you know what that says though, Brian? It says that they are desperate, because if they're changing everything she ever said, if they're memory holding everything that she said that they don't want us to know, if they are 100% trying to change the focus of the campaign to Trump. Kamala said, no, Trump, convicted felon, Trump, convicted felon.
Yeah, weird. Don't forget, you got to throw in a weird once in a while.
He's weird. He's convicted felon, Trump. But Kamala, no, so because whoever the campaign is about is the person that is who loses. So, but that's what has to be believed by the arms of the DNC that are the mainstream media.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm not sure if it'll be notable in 60 or 70 years as people reflect back on this, I think it could be, but it may kind of fall, kind of run under the radar, is the shift in allegiances, public allegiances, that is, in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
There are very wealthy. You're a tech guy and you're in the tech space. Up until 18 months ago, this is August of 2024 as we're recording this.
Yep.
Up until 18 months ago, there's nothing you could have done to get a tech billionaire, a tech CEO, anybody from Silicon Valley to say anything other than Trump should be put in prison and or executed.
Right.
I mean, literally, they. Not only was he a bad guy, but he needs to be put somewhere in a box, in a cage, in a thing, right?
Yep.
And now there's this it started as a little trickle. Started as one or two guys. I think David Sachs was one of the guys.
Yeah, Peter Thiel.
A couple little voices, and now I heard Mark Zuckerberg called Trump after he was
I
shot.
heard that. I didn't hear much more about it, but I did hear that.
I don't know all the details, but a phone call happened. According to what I've seen, that would not have. I mean, there's no way in the world that would have happened 2 years ago.
Facebook would be canceled.
Zuckerberg also said he was not going to do the thing he did in the last election. Now, whether or not it's true, I couldn't say. But there's this kind of rumbling, kind of growing voice coming out of Silicon Valley of all places. This is not the oil fields of Texas.
Right. Right.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think first of all, to become a tech billionaire, you can't be a moron. I mean, so I don't think it's safe to say, people like, Elon Musk, he's the richest dude. You don't become the richest dude in the world, especially coming to America when you got like $1,000 in your pocket when you're 17 and become the richest guy in a short span of decades. So, I think that, well, the other two things. One, you don't become a tech billionaire by being an idiot. Number two, there's probably a lot of undercurrent of, we weren't too bad off under Trump. And these things that these, socialists are saying, what Wall said, that socialism is kind of like being neighborly or something. That's so,
one person's socialism and another person's neighborliness. Yeah.
So, they look at that and, tech billionaires don't do too well under socialism. From what I understand, at least. I mean, either that or you're completely brought to heel by the communists in Beijing. So and I think the other thing that happens is everybody rushes to be second in anything significant. Everybody wants to be number two. So nobody wants to be the first one to support Trump. But if the first one and the second one come, they didn't get there. There aren't protesters outside their house, and their Maserati hasn't been squished. So maybe I'll come out in a tepid way. So I think there's some of that. Now, to be fair, the vast majority of Silicon Valley still hates him. So or overtly hates him. Maybe but I think there's probably they say in polling that there's that sort of shadow Trump, response. Like somebody calls you up and says, "Will you vote for you voted for him last time? You're going to vote for?" No, I don't. I'm going to vote for Trump. I don't like his tweets.
I have no doubt that all let's not even say billionaires. Let's just say high upper middle class and above.
Yeah,
I have no doubt that many of those people who are publicly outwardly facing anti-Trump, probably voted for him.
Yeah. Yeah, and
they are capitalists and they are wealthy and they do enjoy the tax cuts and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nothing else not agreed.
Well, absolutely. Enlightened self-interest is what they call that, right? Yeah. Well, and the thing about that is too that I think they see that Trump has basically got the same policies as Bill Clinton.
Yeah,
I mean, really, at the end of the day, Trump is kind of like Bill Clinton. I mean, he's not really socially conservative. He's not what I would call a social conservative. I mean, I'm much more socially conservative than Trump is. He hasn't proven himself to be super fiscally conservative. I mean, he
had a pretty good hand in the national debt.
He had a good hand. Yeah. So I mean, from my republicanism, Trump is not a Republican like I'm a Republican. He's a new kind of Republican. So so I think he's more palatable to them because of those things, because that he doesn't have that kind of thing going on. And I think they see that Kamala Harris and Walz are off the rails, progressive. And that's and they know enough about economics to know that that's going to be bad for the country. I mean, it just is. There's just, I mean, you can't even argue it anymore. That's why there's some of my friends, I'll post stuff about, Harris and such, and they won't even talk about it. They'll just post Trump 34 felonies, because they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to, everybody wants to, she needs to hide from her record in order to be elected because her record is just so dismal and nobody's ever liked her. So, you've got all of those things. And I think that makes it easier for people to come out and at least tepidly support Trump.
I did hear a guy on an interview a couple days ago who's, I don't know if he's a billionaire, but he's a very wealthy guy in Silicon Valley, and he's an immigrant from Iran, I think, or no, Jordan. Sorry, he's an immigrant from Jordan, and he's been, lived in the United States since he was however year, whatever age. In 2012, his family moved here, and he was young or whatever, and he kind of likened it to small business is still as of 2024 is still kind of the backbone of the United States
Absolutely,
economy.
yeah,
right. And but if you look around, like there's not a lot of places where small businesses are starting up,
right,
but there are a bunch in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And so he kind of likened it to like this is like our new version of our new incubator for small businesses is there. And so if you like small businesses, well, you can't have communist slash socialist slash centrally governed everything if you want to foster small business development.
Right.
And so he was saying that again, I'm sure there's monetary factors in there as well, but like AI is a burgeoning industry, and there's these tech industries that are really developing and things like that, and this is kind of the incubator for that. So you can't be saying you want to develop all these small businesses that you're likely going to make a lot of money on, and will build the economy and employ lots of people and things like that, and say you want arguably socialist slash communist like governance. Like those things don't go hand in hand.
And I think there's more. I think that's a really good point, right? Because I think there's a lot more.
Well, it's not mine. I can't take credit for it. I heard the guy say it.
Well, I was going to give you credit for it, but that's okay. So I think there's a lot more subsurface, massive support for Trump than there is. Because if you're one of the Mag 7, you've got the kind of, for KDG's purposes, those are the 7 biggest stocks on the planet, and they control the up and down of the stock market is theirs, not anybody below the biggest 7. If you're in that group, you have multi-million-dollar year lobbyists hired. You can push the government, and you can do a lot to engage in crony capitalism that smaller businesses, $100 million, $10 million businesses can't do. So I think there's a lot more dependence of that, next strata down of business on getting a fair tax code, getting fair regulatory treatment, getting fair import export kinds of treatment than there is for somebody like Facebook or Google or Amazon.
Well, we don't have anything else. We don't have manufacturing anymore.
Right.
There's only so many.
We're service and tech economy. We're service and tech economy. That's 100%.
Yeah, there's only so many service businesses you can have.
Right.
I mean, you don't increase demand by growing service companies. You just change the shares that people, market share.
Yeah.
So the tech stuff is kind of what we have right now, and I'm not complaining about that. I mean, I wish we had more manufacturing, of course. I wish we manufactured our own medication here, for example. It seems kind of silly to have that manufactured by people who are chanting "Death to America" and all that kind of stuff. But
that's
whatever, that's where we live in right now.
Yep.
So it does kind of make sense for that, but it also feels like there's a social, not just fiscal responsibility, not just business. Supporting business. It does feel like the mood is changing. Elon Musk, he deserves a ton of credit for that. Not only buying Twitter, but coming out like I saw a thing he put out yesterday that said like Kamala Harris is a communist. It was very, very blunt.
Yeah.
And then you have like I think it's David Ackman and David Sachs and these guys who are like, I think there's more to it than just the monetary stuff, which again, I'm not dismissing that. I'm sure they want to make more money and keep more of their money, not pay taxes. I get all that stuff. But it does feel like we've kind of hit a point in which highly respected people in circles that, again, 18 months ago, this would not have been okay. They would not have peeked their head above the crowd. are starting to say, okay, this has gone too far.
Well,
does that feel right to you?
No, I think that's exactly right. And I think there's a very specific reason for that. And that's because, they talk about the Overton window of the things that are acceptable to talk about. The things that we're being told need to be mainstream, you mentioned a little bit before, are things that are so far outside of the comfort level of most people. The idea that, we should have children having their genitals cut off at, age 9 or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be that the social issues were around things like abortion, gay marriage, this type of thing. And a lot of people are like, well, I'm not really comfortable with this right-wing religious position. But if you just walk up to anybody on the street and say, hey, do you think a 9-year-old should have his testicles cut off? I think 9.9 out of 10 people are going to say, well, the first thing they're going to say, get away from me.
What? Yeah, get away, weirdo.
Get away,
You're weird.
You're weird. What are you with Vance there? No, I mean, so I think what's happened is on the social issues, what we're being told is normal social stuff has been extended so far that even people that are liberals, I know plenty of liberals that are like, these progressive things. No, I want a big safety net. I want universal income. I want, all these liberal policies. But they're like, dudes showering with teen girls. No, I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah. I also, this is complete speculation. Again, I'm not a psychologist or sociologist. I would know this stuff, but I do think that Elon Musk buying Twitter and making that a place where things couldn't be banned, points of view couldn't be banned, news articles couldn't be banned. I do think that people who care about status, and I got to imagine very wealthy people in Silicon Valley do.
Sure.
When provable facts are being shared now on Twitter in the public square, I got to imagine you look pretty silly sometimes arguing against things that are demonstrably true.
Yeah.
And I have to think that that's a factor that, okay, before Elon Musk bought it and like everything was censored and, if you had an outside a mainstream media view, you were the weirdo because you couldn't prove anything because it was all censored, right? That's not the case anymore. I mean, there's still a lot of censorship and things like that on Twitter, but it's not like Facebook. You can put a lot of things on Twitter you can't put on Facebook and Instagram and all these other things with supporting data.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta figure that, and that's starting to like trickle out too. Like, okay, if you're for this thing, whatever it is that the mainstream media is saying you should be for, but then there's like this article going around Twitter about how that's absolute nonsense, and here's the data to support our argument.
Right.
And all they have is the empty words you and I were talking about a half an hour ago.
Right.
I gotta figure that's factoring in because at some point you're going to go, this looks really stupid.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's true. I think people and I think people in those positions also, not being morons, have some sense of strategic, a notion
credibility.
Well, yeah, like, I think they're not going to want it. One, they're not going to be able to build their business in a country that's collapsing. Social collapse doesn't serve anybody. And I think at some point, those people are also going to, I don't think they're all like, barons and tycoons that are like,
no.
the guy twisting their mustaches and all that. I think they're human beings that say, we do need to have a functional country. And how can we do that if we're doing some of these wackadoodle things that we're talking about? So I think there's just a natural pushback when stuff has been pushed too far for even the liberals to support it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, we covered a lot here this week, Dave. As Dave mentioned, don't forget, we're trying to explain to people in future generations what this moment in time is like for regular Joes like me and Dave with traditional Judeo-Christian values. Like, people are going to look back and say either, what the hell did you sit on your ass and not do anything for? Or, what kind of morons were you? Because guys like Dave and I have been wiped off the planet, right? It likely won't be anything in between. It'll be one of those two, probably. We're just trying to explain to people what this moment's like. So if you think there's something we got wrong, we'd love to hear about it. If you think there's something we got right, and you have an opinion on that, we'd like to hear that too. You can do that at unsilentpodcast.com, or Rumble has a great comment section. You can do it there too. And until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be Unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.